Maybe on their EA Sports team, the esports team.
Well, thankfully you haven't seen the rest of the studio because that's where all the money's being spent, right?
It's just glad that, we didn't take another 3 months off in between episodes.
Welcome to Rogue Bogues Basketball Series, back for another week. A lot going on, not only in the NBA, but the NBL, which we'll get into a little bit later. We'll go through an Eastern Conference preview. The Pro's actually done his homework this week for Fact or Fake News, so look forward to getting into it, Pro. What's news over there?
Not much, Bogues. Just glad that, we didn't take another 3 months off in between episodes, so I'm pretty glad about that.
Still young. We're 2 episodes in on the video. We might take a break next week. We'll see how we go. There's a lot of production that goes into this. A lot of hard work at Mayen. You just have to show up with your little Rondo locker room tag and press record. We got to do a lot of the hard yards over at this end, mate. So, yeah. I
mean, for all that fucking construction you did, I was expecting like an $8 million fucking room over there. It looks like a fucking, a substitute teacher's office over there with that fucking whiteboard. I was expecting like Joe Rogan ×2 over there.
Oh, we're getting there, man.
I'm a little underwhelmed
we can decorate the room. They're actually sound panels, Pro. Remember the old producer was trying to get you to put some insulation in your room for the echo? That's what they do. These good things here stop that, as you can see, people. And we can actually put some decorations on them. So maybe we'll get a Rondo plaque like yours and put it behind my head. Get your wife to decorate your room, man. Get your wife to decorate that room a little bit better.
Why don't you start spending some money? You spend money like Donald Sterling used to spend money when he was the Clipper owner.
Well, thankfully you haven't seen the rest of the studio because that's where all the money's being spent right behind us off camera. But let's get into it. Few news items. So Pro James Harden will be professional. He's going to be professional and he's going to show up and do what he has to do until he's moved on. He's not going to wear the fat suit this time in warm-ups, I don't think, which is what some people alleged he did in Houston. And I think he did, considering how much in shape he was once he got traded. But I think it's a smart move, and I think he had to do it. You don't want to get Carmelo Anthony, right? I mean, he's still not at that phase of his career, but he almost is. You don't want to get that tab where you don't want to play a role or, be kind of that, pass on that superstar mantle. And I'm not sure if you saw Stephen A. Smith's comments about Houston, that he had an interview with Ime Udoka during, was it free agency or something like that, and he led with something along the lines of, I want to lead the league in scoring again. that was his messaging with Ime, and they kind of like, we're going to go in a different direction. Actually, we're not going to trade for you and give you an extension. So, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think with the Harden deal. First off, he's got very little to no trade value. As far as what he's making versus, what teams are really doing to try to get him. I think right now, from what you're looking at and what we're all looking at, the Clippers are the only team that really semi-interested, and that thing cooled off pretty easily. There's not really a lot of value. You can't get a lot of value back for him. So, if this was 5 years ago and he's pulling this stunt 4 years ago, then he could probably pull it, not play, not show up. But right now, his value is at an all-time low, as far as what teams are really offering to get. So I think it's smart for him to just compete through training camp. You never know, Bogues. A lot of sometimes this stuff is hot to trot with these trades, and then it cools down. He might find himself in a Philadelphia jersey all year. So you might as well just, get going. Maybe you can get some buzz and get traded like you want. But right now, I think, look, the Philly needs him, even though they picked up, Kelly Oubre and, recently, but they need him. They need him in that lineup. They don't really have a lot of punch besides, Embiid, Tobias Harris, and a couple other players. Like, they don't really have Maxey, they don't really have a lot of talent, outside of a couple players. So they both need each other, unless you're going to get that Norman Powell and a couple other players out of the Clippers. But I just don't think there's really a lot of value for him right now out there. So I think it's good for him to sort of move forward with this.
Yeah, I like your point. I think there's every chance that he does stick, and it's the Kawhi Leonard Toronto kind of all over again. Like, we're just gonna play it out, and Philly start, 18-3 or 18-4. Like, maybe he says, you know what, I got a chance for a championship. I can go out the door that way. I know he doesn't get along with Morey, but MJ didn't get along with Krause. The superstars that don't get along with their GMs. That's just how it is. Now, that is MJ. It's obviously a huge stretch, but On the
But this
flip
is
side,
new though, Bogues. Like those guys are those guys are on great terms through the
divorce,
Houston
right?
years and early Philly. You know,
The other thing is, like, I discussed this with a friend of mine. I had a debate, and he was like, this team should trade for James or that team. And I said, like, I think James is almost in the period of his career where he just needs to come off the bench and be a sixth man on a good team, and he could take them over the top. But my friend was like, "There's no chance he'd do that. There's no chance," and I agree. I don't think he's ready for that. But I think it's coming to that time. Like, he's a really bad defender, but he's an elite scorer still. But it's a net loss on the defensive end. If you are one of these teams that's pushing for a championship in the future, you bring him in as a sixth man, let him play 20 to 30, depending on how he's going. Do you see him buying into that role in the near future, or you still think he's so hard-headed on the James Harden of old, I need to play 45 minutes and get up every shot?
I think if you're talking about players that were elite, top 5, 6 players in the league at one time, downshifting for those guys, the Carmelo Anthonys, the Kobe Bryants, when they get up in age, they don't really take to that role very well. A Harrison Barnes, who was a top 2, top 3 player on teams most of his career, that started downshifting a little bit in Sacramento and things. It's easier for those players, and it's got nothing to do with how good you are or whatnot, but it's a little bit easier, players like that and that to downshift a little bit because A, they've been coachable their whole lives, and B, they just sort of get where they're at in the league. I think it's easier for players. I don't think it's very easy for a guy like James, who's been a number 1 option basically since year 3 in the league up to this point. And I don't think he's going to take that type of role. I think you have to be forced into it like Carmelo, where there's no one that really wants to pick you up. Look, and I just think it's really tough for him. I think, look, they're delusional as it is, most NBA players, especially players that were at that tier. So I think it's something that he's not really willing to do. Guys like us that study the game and sort of look at it from that end of things, I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, he should do that. But you know how players are, especially high-end players. I think it's really hard for him to take that role, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think he's at least a year or two away from even coming to that realization, but I think he could just be such a valuable piece, especially later in his career, that, beyond this free agency, I don't think he'll do it. I think you're right. I think it's very hard for him to come into a team to play a role, but there's not many teams out there that are going to want to A, trade for him, or B, sign him in free agency and say, yep, you're a high usage 40-minute guy at this point in his career. There's probably a handful of teams that would be willing to do that, if that. And then some of those teams are young and rebuilding. So it's like, do you want to bring something like that in the fold? Talking about OKC or, a team like that that's very, very young, Utah, that's got a lot of assets, could use a guy like that off the bench to come in and provide some scoring and maybe put him into a playoff berth or whatever. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be very hard for him to buy in, but I'd like to see it, but I don't think it happens. Joel Embiid, the FIBA International Draft Lottery decision has been made. He's playing for Team USA. As a guy that played international basketball, I hate this process. I think it's wrong. I just don't like the fact that you're almost being recruited by a country to play, right? Like, yeah. I think it sets a bad precedent. The rules are the rules. You can have, even other countries that then do this with US players, that, like, there's been, players that go and play in parts of Russia and then they're naturalized within 6 months, right? Like, I think that's wrong. Mm. I think first and foremost, it should be where you're born. Now there's situations like Kyrie Irving that were born in Australia, was here for 6 months, and then as a 6-month-old moved back to the US, different circumstances, right? But I think your birthplace should take precedent. And then if you have a legitimate argument like Kyrie, that's a pretty simple one to decide. Like, yeah, he went through, elementary school, primary school, high school, all in the US, makes sense, US citizen, all that kind of stuff. But this one, for Embiid, I know he was in the US later in his life, in high school and whatnot. I just hate the recruiting process, bro. I don't know how you feel about it as an American. You already have the, a wide array of talent you can choose from. It would have been nice to see him on France, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I think it's for me. When it comes to international competition, I'm all for birth, where you were born. There, like you said, the Kyrie situation comes up. I'm not even sure about Giannis, how long he spent in Nigeria before he went to Greece. But, there are certain circumstances where you're like, okay, special circumstance, let's do it. I think with the international FIBA Olympic, I think it should just go with your birth country 9 times out of 10, and then certain circumstances. And I think you should limit those certain circumstances for every country. Yeah, I think that like if you have a Kyrie situation, that should only be one per team. So
which I think they have. I think they have a certain rule. They have a certain rule around that. Like you can't just go and naturalize. If you're Moldova or Venezuela and naturalize 10 Americans, they have a rule for that. I think it's 1 or 2 per period or whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like the recruiting aspect. I think Olympic competition, Eurobasket, World Championships, that's sort of a special deal. And I think that's, it's great to see players that were born in that country play and represent that. It's sort of like seeing Hakeem Olajuwon on Team USA, things like that. Tim Duncan, I get it. You play in the NBA, you're around the American, but like, I think that country you're born in is probably the way to go.
I agree. They will be stacked at Team USA, looking like they're putting together, Steph, LeBron, Embiid now. So they're trying to put together a squad to obviously reclaim a podium finish for them in the next Olympics, which will most likely happen with the squad they're putting together. A little bit of a funny one. So games in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, right now, some preseason friendlies. I saw a question was asked to Tatum, who's the assistant VP or the assistant commissioner, whatever you want to call it, and something along the lines of, how do you feel about holding games in a place like the UAE with human rights abuses and all that kind of stuff? And the question was interesting. He said, look, we as the NBA, we travel the way we travel with the same ideals and the same way of life as we do in America when we go overseas, and we try to bring our culture that way, and we don't change it for other countries. And he noted the reason why it's a good thing is because we have a female referee. So that was the reasoning why it's a good thing to have the games in the UAE, because it'll show people in that nation and that region of the world that females are allowed on a basketball court. But I just found that as the reason was somewhat comical. I just thought, like, that's your answer. Like, hey, we have a female official. We're going to break barriers when they see a lady with a whistle. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously referring to the fact that, in a lot of those regions in the Middle East that, some countries don't even allow female spectators at sporting events. So, but I don't think it's going to change a lot, Pro. I don't think there's people in the UAE that are going to see that and say, oh, is that a female referee? That's our whole ideals and everything need to go out the window. The NBA's got it right,
Bogues, when it comes to things like this, China, all the dealing, just say no comment. That's it. Because any answer you give
is wrong.
It's like, yeah, you're not, you're going to look like you're covering. There's no good answer.
Just the good answer is this. We just want to bring basketball to the world. We change regions for every preseason, and there's different cultures that have different beliefs. We're getting on with life. We're here to play basketball. You just
you don't sound good when you're saying any type of a defense, or it's just weak. It comes off as weak. Just say whatever. However you stand on either side of this sort of argument or this issue, I think just take the middle road and just say something vanilla, get through it, and then on to the next question. I think that's the because you don't sound too good when you giving answers like that.
I agree. It was better off just to say nothing at all, but I just thought it was a funny one to reference a female referee. Anyway, Eastern Conference previews, Pro. We threw you a little curveball, much to your disdain. We're going to start with Team 15 and go up to who's going to finish 1, which Pro was abusing me for via text message saying, well, why don't we just do them in alphabetical order then? So we're going to get to that, Pro. But I'll let you go first. Who do you have at 15?
No, why don't we do this, Bogues? Why don't we do this? I know you got your setup over there with your computer screen, and you look like an overpaid fucking Uber driver that's driving a fucking Tesla with that big ass screen in front of you with the fucking headphones on. So why don't we just do it as just straightforward as possible? Why don't you give me your rankings, and then we'll talk about your team. This way we just sort of have a lot of order. Just like I said in the text message when we were talking, like, what if you have a certain team ranked and I have a certain team ranked, and then so why don't we just go with your rankings, and then we'll talk about the team. Because I don't give a fuck how you rank them or how I rank them. I think the best way to just talk about the team.
So I'll go through my 15, and then you go through yours straight away, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty after that. How about that?
Just say, hey, here's what I get for 15. We'll talk about the team, and then we'll go up from there. And we'll go from there. I think that's the best way to do it.
Well, I'd love to hear yours first before. Let's just go through them 15 to 1, and then you go through 15 to 1, and then we'll dig in. All right. So 15, I got Washington. 14, I got Detroit. 13, I got Charlotte. 12th, Chicago. 11th, Toronto. 10th, Orlando. 9, Brooklyn. 8, Indiana. 7, the Knicks. 6, Atlanta. 5, Miami. 4, Philly. 3, Cleveland. 2, Milwaukee. 1, Boston. What do you got, pro?
Not bad, Bogues. Not bad at all.
I took a few flyers, but we'll get into that shortly after we hear the Guru's 15. Let's go.
I don't know about the Guru, but we'll see what we got. All right. So what I have is 15 Charlotte, 14 Washington, 13 Detroit, 12 Chicago, 11 Toronto, 10 Indiana, 9 Brooklyn, 8 Orlando, 7 Atlanta, 6 Miami, 5 New York, 4 Cleveland, 3 Philly, 2 Boston, and Milwaukee at 1.
Pretty similar. Flipped a few, but let's get into it. All right, let's start with I'll just start with 1. All right,
Your
Boston.
ranking.
I'm going to go with Boston. So you got them 2. I got them 1. I think a well-balanced, pretty deep roster. I think they can sustain an injury too, except the center spot. I think that's the one we've spoken about with Porzingis. That's a vital one for them. I mean, they got Horford. They can flip into some minutes, but I think that's the one they need to keep healthy the most. I think Tatum, Brown, one out of the lineup, one in with Drew Holiday now and White. I think they can sustain one of their wings getting hurt for a period of time during the season with injuries. I'd like to see some Jaylen Brown growth again. Didn't start off too well today, pro. I don't know if you saw the preseason game, but he had his shorts on backwards for the game, as noted by our good friend Brian Scalabrine. He's like, his shorts backwards? They were. It's not a great start for Jaylen Brown. Hopefully he gets that right, but it is preseason, so a lot of guys sleepwalk through that shit. But their defense, look, I think we spoke about Tatum taking that next step and becoming at least an average defender. I think he did that last season. I think he became at least an average defender. He needs to take another step defensively. Jaylen Brown has been pretty solid defensively. Porzingis can then at least manage the rim for him. Joe Mazzulla is the outlier, right? It's can he get him over the line? You know, an inexperienced NBA coach still, with the whole fallout of Ime Udoka came into that coaching spot. He's probably the inexperienced part of their roster, pro, in my eyes. But I've got them at 1 still. But what are your thoughts on Boston? You had them at 2, of course.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with what they added with Holiday and Porzingis is great. You know, it's a great addition, and their starting 5 is as good as any in the league, if not probably the best starting 5 in basketball. I think that where they come up a little short is obviously their bench, their second unit. You know, Derek White. You know, let's talk about the starting unit. They got a real point guard in there. You know, Holiday. You know, great on defense. You know, could set everybody up. You know, obviously, you know, could make shots. Could just sort of, you know, keep everything calm. You know, Tatum needs, like you said, to take that next step on the defensive level. I spent about 3 or 4 hours last week watching Tatum on both ends of the ball, and you know, defensively, he has all the tools to become a good defender. Not an elite defender, but a very good defender. And I just think he needs to understand the importance of playing both ends of the floor, you know, because he's so elite on the offensive end. The defensive end, he just needs to add that. I really like Porzingis. I don't think he's a great shooter. I think he's a good one, but he gives them some offensive firepower on the elbow ISO, on posting them up, on pops and drives and things like that. I worry about him staying healthy. I'm sure they're going to rest him a certain amount of time. The injury thing I do worry about with him and Horford. Horford with age, even though he played okay last year and he's been pretty good with the staying out of the injury bug. I do worry about Porzingis, who really hasn't played a full season until his first couple of years in the league. He's had some issues almost every year he's been in the league since. Second unit, Derek White. Brissett they pick up. Sam Hauser's okay. I think that second unit they're going to have some issues with. They're going to have to sort of mismatch the lineups, play guys a little longer out of starting rotation and just keep some starters on the floor almost at all times because that second unit's not very good. Derek White, Pritchard, Brissett, that's where they're going to have, I think, a little bit of their drought shooting off the bench. But that starting five is so good. But I think they're going to be an elite team. If they're not going to be the best team, they'll be the second best team, unless an injury bug hits. But it'll be good. And Mazzulla, look, he's going to get better as, I think it's good for guys to get punched in the mouth as much as possible early on. Last year, he took his hits. I think this year, I think the biggest thing for him is letting things in the media, as far as what he says and how he comes across. I think he's got to let a lot of things just roll off his back and be like, all right, and let things go. I think he's very combative at things, and it just shows a little immaturity at times. And especially when you're going through some losing streaks, it could be a big distraction going forward. I just think that, let some things go. He's a very good coach. He's going to be a better coach in time. But I think he has to just sort of grow up with this process. But I think they're going to be a very good team. I just think that second unit's a little bit bare. But look, besides Sam Presti, I think Stevens has been the best GM in the league. They've got multiple first-round picks. They got a lot of second-round picks they can deal at the trade deadline to try to upgrade that team. There's going to be a lot of disgruntled veterans. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be on the move and all-star, at trade and deadline. It doesn't have to be an elite player, but I definitely think they could, soup up that second unit with trading pick swaps or first-round picks in the future to go forward with it.
Well, today they start that interesting starting lineup. Today they started Derek White, Tatum, Brown, Horford at the center spot and Porzingis at the 4. I don't think that's the long-term solution. I think that you got to move Porzingis to the center spot to then move Brown to the 4. The 4 spot's the problem from this team. They don't really have a solid 4-man. But Brown's more of a 3, can play some 4. Horford.
What would you do? Would you play who's your 4? So you're Brown at 4. So who they start today? So who didn't they start?
Drew Holiday came off the bench. It was Derek White at the point.
Okay.
Tatum, Brown, Horford, Porzingis. So obviously Drew's going to start. I like White off the bench anyway. I think he provides a nice punch off him. So you go, the 3 guards are pretty much set. But in Tatum, Brown, and Holiday, problem is what do you do at the 4 spot? I don't think Horford, Porzingis playing together for long stretches is a solution. That's probably what they're looking at as well. So I would move Porzingis to the 5 and maybe Brown at the 4 and start games that way. I think they'll
Horford off the bench.
Have Horford off the bench. He can come in for Brown if he has to for a little bit foul trouble. But you're right. Their bench depth beyond that. So Horford gets in foul trouble. Porzingis, it's like who are you going to at your 4-5? You're relying a lot on Luke Cornett, who's still a bit hasn't played a lot of minutes in the NBA over his career, and you're relying a lot on him. He played big minutes. No, he played 12 and a half minutes in the preseason, but you're relying on guys that haven't been there.
You know what you could do then, Bogues? Why not? I would put maybe Hauser in your starting lineup. Go small, put Hauser in your starting lineup, keep White off the bench, put Hauser, even though he's a little bit of a mismatch defensively, but he's a shooter. He's got size and he's a shooter. Put him at 2. Then you get Brown, Brown and Tatum play the 3, the 4. Tatum Brown plays 3-4. Porzingis at 5. Now you slide Horford into that second, like you said, that second unit, because that's Gabriel and Cornett really aren't the answer at the backup center. And if you have Horford, you got Horford, and especially when those nights that Porzingis is banged up, maybe you bring him off the bench and you start Horford. But I think like you said, starting Porzingis, rim protector, and then you go smaller. You just put that shooter to give them shooting to surround.
Doesn't need the ball neither.
Line up with shooting.
Yeah, it doesn't need the ball. So it's another guy that you can just. He's playing a role. He's a 3-and-D guy, really, next to those ball handlers. But yeah, I don't like the 2 big starting, especially with some of the teams that you're going to play that play uber small. But that's Boston 1. All right, Milwaukee. I got 2. They're your 1. Last year's number 1 seed. They added more offense and lost some defense. We spoke about it last week. I think they'll be a very good regular season team, and I even had in my notes could even push Boston for the 1. I think it's very, very dicey there. But my dislikes are the same as Boston. It's the depth. It's Milwaukee have the same issue. Notable acquisitions are so with the acquisitions in this, I'm doing guys that they've acquired and also guys that haven't played or were on the roster late, right? So a notable one, obviously Dame Lillard, Robin Lopez has come back. Jay Crowder he's almost like an acquisition because he was rendered DNP CD the whole season last year. And I think they could have used him. So he'll be in the rotation and they can use him. They can use some of his 3-and-D type stuff. He's a good hustle guy. He's physical, can guard kind of their best wings. So, but yeah, they've got a depth issue as well. Once you go, their top 7's really good. And then there's a little bit of a fall off with some younger guys.
Yeah. I mean, obviously their top 2 with Giannis and Lillard, and biggest problem here is keeping Middleton healthy. Look, Lillard's been banged up the last couple of years. Giannis has been banged up this summer. I think Middleton, keeping him healthy last year was very productive compared to what he did in the past. 15, 4-4. He needs to show a little bit more. Now, I've got that starting lineup of Lillard, Beasley, Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez. And look, Lopez, elite rim protector. You got Lillard and Giannis. That's going to be good. I think Malik Beasley is going to gives them. He's been inconsistent throughout his career, but he could score a little bit. The second unit got a little bit better late in the free agency when they picked up Cameron Payne the last couple of weeks. I think they're still a little bit weak. Connaughton had one of his worst shooting years in his career last year. They need to be able to make shots off the bench. Their best bench player is Bobby Portis. 14-9. He brings it every night. He's tough. Robin Lopez, I really enjoy. I think he's a good, backup center that can give you 8 to 10 minutes a night. But keeping those guys consistently healthy, because look, with Giannis, he's such a high usage, high athletic, always, full speed.
Physical.
Once you start getting little injuries here and there, it can expand for him. So they got to be able to, play the whole rest thing and be able to keep these guys healthy throughout the year. But the Middleton deal is going to be the biggest problem for them, keeping him healthy. I think their bench is a little bit better than Boston's, especially with campaign. I do like him. Bucamp, the second-year player, averaged 13 minutes a game. He's going to play a little bit more. I do like them. I think they're a little bit deeper than Boston. Their star power, I think, is a little bit better with their top 2 versus Boston's top 2. They just got to keep everybody healthy, and I think if they can do that, they're gonna be really a real tough out in the East this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a coin flip with where that all goes. A lot's going to rely on the health of Giannis and just the way he plays. He's going to get a little ding every now and then, an ankle or a knee. Just he goes full speed with that Euro. But those two will be in the mix for the top spot in the East, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they play. I mean, they definitely have acquired more offense, and they were pretty decent last season, and they got better in that fact. And also, to your point, I think Middleton's the outlier in all of this. Middleton's that piece. He's not the best player on the team, but he's that piece that makes this all work. If he has a bad year, I don't think they go deep. He needs to have a solid year, and not only at the offensive end, the defensive end. Like I said last week, you've lost, a very good defensive elite, top 5 defensive elite guard in Holiday. You're replacing that now with Dame, who's not a great defensive player. Middleton's probably going to get that assignment now. Maybe Connaughton as your defending wings. So watch that space. 3. I had Cleveland. Who'd you have at 3?
Who did I have at 3? Bogues. I believe I had Cleveland. Hold on a second. Standings. Boom. I've got Philly at 3.
Yeah, Philly at 3. I had Cleveland. I think they take a jump.
Okay.
I think they have continuity in their roster, and I think they'll further grow. I think there's an underrated aspect in the NBA of keeping guys together, and I think that they've kept their core, and their young core is young and experienced the last couple of seasons, obviously bringing in Donovan Mitchell. I think they'll flourish with another year together. And they brought in some good, solid role guys. Damian Jones back up big, Strauss from Miami, and Georges Niang. So I like those guys as role players who won't come in and cause problems. They'll play their role well. Dislikes for them are they're just young and inexperienced. They haven't been battle tested in long playoff series and conference finals yet to probably warrant a 3. But I think in the regular season they'll flourish. Do they get deep into a playoff run at the 3? The jury's out for me. But I think in a regular season they should still enough wins to be up there in the East. That's kind of my thinking on them. What do you got on them?
Yeah, they're really good. Bogues, obviously, with Donovan Mitchell and Mobley and Jared Allen. They brought in some decent players, like you talked about. I don't know. Here's the thing I don't like to do, but I'm probably going to do it right now. I don't like to say, well, what a player's thinking about, because who knows, right? But does Donovan Mitchell start getting a little bit antsy about getting out of there? Does he want to stay? Does he not want to stay? You hear some rumblings here and there. Is that going to become a little bit of a distraction? I'm not a huge Darius Garland fan at the point, but he gives you, he's always on the attack and he could score and he's not bad. I like the Strus acquisition off the bench. LeVert's good. Do they have enough at the small forward spot? Cedi Osman's okay. He's been solid. Isaac Okoro's okay. But do you have that, small forward that could really take it to the next level? And then Donovan Mitchell has to step up in playoff time. And look, it's early. Obviously, we're not even started the year yet, but he's got to step up more in the playoffs and become that go-to guy that could really, score in the 30s a game and really carry it. Hasn't really shown that in his playoff career. He was very good last year at 28, 4-4. I thought he was underwhelming playoff wise. Damian Jones is okay. Georges Niang okay. They got some solid players. Jared Allen's got to stay healthy throughout the year. I think he can really help them.
He got hurt already at camp, apparently. Yeah, he's off a couple of weeks.
Right,
so.
and then the same thing. We do celebrate last year a little bit the way they play, the way they play two bigs wise. And we're talking about Boston, how we don't like it for them, but it did work for them with Mobley and Allen, playing together. Rebounding, shot blocking, running the floor activity. So it'll be interesting. I like their bench. I think their bench is good. Strus gives you shot making. LeVert could really score. Niang and Okoro are just solid. I think I like where they're at. JB Bickerstaff's a very good coach. He really has done a great job for them last year. So I like them. I just don't know exactly where they're going to go, but I do think they could, they could withstand some things. I just think some people got to really step up. I think Osman's got to really, step his game up. And I think Mitchell, again, once we get in the postseason, he's got to get to another level.
Yeah, I agree. They're tough. They're tough to pencil in exactly where, but I just had them at 3. I had Philly at 4, so we flipped on those two. You had them at 3. Mm-hmm. They'll be in the mix for a top 4 spot, just with last season's MVP. And they should get something back for a disgruntled Harden that should hopefully help them. Probably won't be a superstar, obviously, like you said at the start of the podcast. But the dislike is if Harden does go and they don't get much back, they haven't surrounded Embiid with a lot when they bet on Harden so heavily. That's kind of been the outlier. And who would have known that relationship between Daryl Morey and James would have went that way? But it has. Obviously at the start we said that. Maybe James does stay if they start off well, but notable acquisitions for them. Patrick Beverley, your guy Mo Bamba, he's in the lineup. Danny Green healthy, which is kind of a notable acquisition if you can get just to being a 15-minute role guy for them, and Kelly Oubre Jr. So I think they have a pretty, they did some quiet work in the offseason, and they're pretty notable guys that can help them as far as role players. If James is there, I think these role players are very important if James is there. Take James out, then all of a sudden you need more from Pat Bev offensively. You need more from Danny Green coming off injury. You need more from Kelly Oubre, right? So if James is there with those acquisitions, I think they're very good acquisitions. It'll just be a matter of time to see whether he sticks. And we probably, I don't know, I don't think he sticks because I think James is kind of, when he has his mind set on leaving somewhere, he's leaving. I don't think they'll be able to pull the Kawhi Leonard card that Toronto did with him when he won that championship. We're keeping you and that's it. But I'd like to see him stay and just see how it goes with this roster. But they'll be in the mix for top 4. I have them at 4 at the moment.
Yeah, they're a tough sort of read. Where they're going to be. Does Embiid become disgruntled? Does Harden? How long that goes? I mean, we obviously know the stories that they're just fucking boring to talk about. To be honest with you, I do like. I do like Harden and Maxey in the same lineup, 2 ball handlers, 2 guys who can make plays, 2 guys who could really score. PJ Tucker is what he is. He's old. He's, never really scores. He's not really a threat that way, but he's that tough guy, that defender. Tobias Harris has been up and down. I do like Kelly Oubre coming off the bench, could give him a really big spark scoring. He averaged like 20 and 5 last year. The James Harden thing, look, he's got very little to no value because of the fact that he makes $35 million a year. And we look at this all the time about him, his relationship with Morey. Look, I don't trust either one of those two. I think they're both liars. They're never going to tell you the truth. If they told me today was fucking Sunday in America, I'd probably go home and check a calendar anyway. But like, to me, I think that, look, he signed a contract regardless. He opted in. He signed that 1-year deal, $35 million. He's got to live up to it. Obviously he's not. He's probably going to become more disgruntled as the days go on, with this little fucking mirage of going through training camp. I do think that he's a good fit in their starting lineup. Most of these teams are going to go young, or they don't want a guy like that that's going to be a distraction. The Clippers really like him. If they can work out a deal where they could bring in Norman Powell and Terrence Mann, I think those two guys would really help, surround Embiid with not as good at individually talented players like a Harden, but two really good players sort of collectively that could take them over the hump, and really challenge for the East. But with this roster the way it is right now, look, I think it's good. It's solid. You got two guards that are really tough to stop. Tobias Harris could really score and give you some things. Obviously, we know Joel Embiid could give you, the second unit with Oubre. Beverly gives you a little bit of toughness. He could guard. Oubre could give you really good scoring. House is just okay. Harrell and Paul Reed are they're just decent. Their second unit's okay, but I do like the Oubre. They picked up Oubre for nothing like last week or the last 10 days. But I think that they got to figure out, what are you going to do long term? There's a lot of bark and a very little bite with these things sometimes at Harden, especially. It's not like a Leonard where there was a million teams wanting him. I think if you really polled GMs and you talk to them, I think there's about 5 teams that could really even think about it. Probably only 1 or 2, realistically. Because again, you're a team that there's no one that's going to absorb his $35 million, and just take them, right? Philly's not going to take draft picks. Morey doesn't develop players. He wants guys that could help him today. And there's really nobody out there that's going to take Harden, on their present roster and accept the fact that there's not going to be any bullshit things that go on. I think the Clippers need it. They need somebody to take them over the hump. I think it's going to end up being LA, if anything. Or they're just going to say,
stalemate.
Hey, look, let's go forward with you and go from there.
Yeah, I hope they stalemate it. I hope they do, because I think their roster's pretty good with him in it. You come with a half motivated Harden, you can win some games. So I hope it goes stalemate. Daryl, hold your line. Philly, hold your line, and then just let the deadline pass. I think they got a chance for a championship, or at least pushing for a championship with that roster. I think there's. I think Philly have a better chance, for instance, of making it further in the playoffs than Cleveland do. But I just picked Cleveland 3 based on the whole Harden saga. 5, I had Miami. Where'd you have them? 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Look, I just can't bet against Spo anymore. We had them in the mix last year, and they were awful, but in the regular season. But they managed to get it done. Issue is they cruise through the regular season a lot. And they can manage to turn it on like we saw last season. I mean, the dislikes are depth for them as well. It's just amazing how the league's gone, so superstar cap heavy that we're seeing a lot of teams with depth questions, right? It's one of those things you don't really have any roster that's super deep these days. Even the younger rosters. I mean, maybe you're OKC or something, but that's because they're all young and they're not going to win a lot of games. But the only really acquisition they had, Thomas Bryant. That'll come in and play a little bit of backup minutes. If he's healthy, I like him. I was with him in LA, high energy guy, passionate guy, plays hard, can provide a little bit of a burst for them off the bench. But I think they'll be solid. I mean, Tyler Hero, does he stay there? He seems a little disgruntled in this whole thing with his name being floated out there in the Dame rumors, and he's made, I think, some passive aggressive comments over the summer about. 1 foot in, 1 foot out to Miami. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. You got the whole Jimmy Butler emo haircut pro. I'm sure you appreciated that and whatever he was doing. I believe he does it just for his NBA photo thing to be different every season. But that was very interesting. But I just can't bet against Miami. I think they'll still be a solid team in the East.
For sure, they're going to be solid. The problem for them, I think, Bogues, is losing. You lose Gabe Vincent. And you lose Max Strus, and you didn't really replace them. You replaced them a couple of guys that one rookie, Jaime Jaquez, I don't know if I've pronounced his name right, rookie from UCLA, and Nikola Jovic. You've been hearing about him the last year or so, all summer about the trade stuff to Portland. So you lose those 2 guys that were really really big time for you in the playoffs. and you didn't really replace him. Now,
they couldn't, bro.
You got to start.
That was
lineup.
the thing, right, bro?
What's
They couldn't replace him because they were like pretty much min guys, right? Like they were real bargain contracts, right? Yeah, they couldn't even replace him if they wanted to, right?
Yeah, no, for sure they couldn't replace him, but I feel as though that they really, they didn't have it salary wise to do it, but now they just basically they didn't really get anything new talent wise into their lineup. They've got unproven players. Now they got to step up big time with minutes. Thomas Bryant, solid. I do like Kevin Love, with his shot making and ability to stretch the floor. But, their starting lineup's good with Lowry, Hero, Martin, Butler, Bam. But that second unit, Duncan Robinson give you shot making. Richardson's tough. They don't really have a true point guard coming off the bench. They're probably going to have to, play Hero extended minutes into the second unit from being starter and then slide him over to the point, when they take Lowry out of the game. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be really tough for them to really make a run. I think regular season they'll be okay, but really make it a run, they're going to be really, top 5 heavy. And then that second unit really doesn't give them enough, in my opinion. I agree with you. Don't bet against Miami. But I do think that they downshifted 2 players that really helped them in the playoffs. And again, like you said, they couldn't keep those 2 guys. It is what it is with salary cap and sort of what you're handcuffed and things that you can't do. They're way over the cap. They can't really bring guys in. So it was really hard for them free agency wise to replace them. But it's just, look, can Jovic really step up from playing 13 minutes a night to a bigger role? Could some of their younger players really step up? I think it's going to be tough. Bryant's okay. He's not the smartest guy in the world when he plays, but he plays hard. He'll give them decent backup minutes, but he's not a guy that could really step up and give them a lot. I think they're really betting on Jovic being something good. Haywood Highsmith's another guy that played a lot in the playoffs because of injury, averaged 4 and 3 last year out of the backcourt. He's going to be another guy. But I just think that second unit, with that really, without, they had a little bit of a cushion being able to bring Hero off the bench last year in the regular season. And I think that having that guy is really beneficial for you to go forward, having that one guy that could give you 20 to 25 a night on any given night. They don't really have that in the second unit. I think that's going to hurt them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they could be anywhere from 5 to 10 the way they play, and they are kind of a team that limps around the regular season. So, but I would have said this, no one expected them to go anywhere as near where they went, like last season in the playoffs, they managed to flick a switch, but they did lose a lot of grunt with some of the guys that went. 6-8 Atlanta, I think you had them at 5. Quinn Snyder, I think he'll see them improve dramatically. I think he's a very good coach. I think he implement his system there. I think he'll have them sharing the ball, playing a certain style, and they will get better defensively. They don't have a lot of great defensive players, especially, the elephant in the room there is Trae Young needs to get to just an average level defensively for them to be anything decent. He can't be, Velcro on screens and gambling for steals and floating out by the 3 defensively. If you can just get, and everyone compares him to Steph, offensively because he shoots long threes. Where I would compare him to Steph is get to the point where Steph got to defensively. Steph wasn't a great defender earlier in his career, had some injury issues, he wasn't physical, got in the weight room, got strong, and bought into to watching tape and just competing. Like if you just compete and you're Trae Young, yeah, you're small, you're not the most physical guy, yes, screens hurt, but if you just compete, I think, and just get yourself to an average level where you can't be blatantly picked on, I think it changes a lot for Atlanta's journey. But if you're the Trae Young of old, where you're dropping 40 a night, but your guys, your 10-point a night point guard's got 18 or 20 against you and dictating the game, then you're almost at a net even with what you're bringing on the offensive end, or you need to have an outlier game to mitigate what you're giving up at that end. So that's a big one for me. I mean, notable acquisitions, Patty Mills, Australian Patty Mills is there, and Wes Matthews, another good acquisition, probably getting a bit older now, pro, but a guy that plays hard, really good defender, 3-and-D guy, shoots the 3 at a decent clip, and he's a competitive guy, so he'll keep those younger guys accountable for their minutes, and I think he'll help them. But they are going to be interesting to watch. I'm really intrigued by kind of what Quinn can do with that squad.
Yeah, The whole Trae Young thing, look, I think that the biggest thing that I think he has to go through this year is not having any drama. Last 2 years, it's been like, issues with him and his coach. And I think that he's got to go through a year of like, all right, you know what? Let's do it. I got to mature now. I got to take this game to a second level. The one thing that held Steph back early on in his career was his injuries. I'm never going to compare Trae and Steph. They're uncomparable. You got one guy who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best players to ever play the position, ever to play the game, and another guy who could put up points. That's basically, and pass the ball a little bit. I think for him, his next step in his progression is getting along with your fucking coach. Enough's enough for this bullshit of the attitude stuff of, the just being combative with your coach.
What is it, three and 5 years, right? Pro? Third coach in 5 years?
You gotta fight through that, man. Sometimes you gotta agree to disagree, and you gotta get in a room and talk it out instead of being one way about it. And look, the whole thing with the first coach, with Pierce, all right, sometimes you might give him the benefit of the doubt or you don't. Even if you gave him the benefit of the doubt, okay, there's one coach, but now he went through another coach, and now he's on his next coach. He's got to relax with that, and he's got to find a way, regardless if you get along with your coach or you don't, to come to a happy medium. And that's the biggest thing for him. He plays no defense. He's a pick and roll scorer that can pass the ball. He puts up a lot of points, puts up a lot of assists. Now he's got to find his way to put those other guys in position to be good players and to help. The biggest problem with Atlanta is you trade John Collins and you don't get anything back. You basically salary dumped him, which now lifts everybody up in their role and what they have to do for the team. I like DeAndre Hunter, and he's a big wing that could do multiple things. He could score. He's got size. He can make shots. Sadiq Bey, he's been a decent player in the last couple of years, averaging 13 and 4 last year. Clint Capella is what he is, rolling big, non-offensive, but he could roll.
He's done well with those kind of guys, right? I mean, Rudy Gobert is the one that comes to mind. Like Quinn's done very well with formulating a defense around a defensive big like that. So that'll be interesting too.
No doubt. And their rookie they drafted, Kobe Bumpkin out of Michigan, they expect a lot out of. He could score. He's got a little bit of flair to him. He plays hard on both ends. Bogan Bogdanovic, obviously, they're expecting a little bit out of him. Their second unit's okay. Bogdan, like, he gives it to you. He's up and down. Obviously, hopefully he could stay healthy this year. AJ Griffin, will give him a little bit. I think they're a good team. Losing John Collins, I'm not a big Collins fan, but, if you could have got something that could really help you, I think they just wanted him off the books, and he's been coming a little bit of disgruntled there the last year. So that's going to be a big problem, losing him for almost nothing. But they're going to go only as long as, as far as Trae Young and DeJounte Murray could take them in the backcourt. They got to be able to score. They got to be able to guard a little bit, and they got to just grind teams out, and they got to be able to have shot makers, guys that come in, know their role, and play hard. Look, I think their coach is really good. I think going forward, Quinn does a great job for them getting them prepared. But, now they're going to have some guys step up. Guys like Jalen Johnson, AJ Griffin, they got to give you a little bit more. I think Patty and Wes will play a little bit. I don't think they're going to play a lot this year. They're going to be more just vets that just stay ready every night and keep pushing those young guys, in my opinion. But I don't know. They're okay. They're one of those teams that you could see at 5 or 6, or you could, if they say, hey, they didn't even make the play-in, you wouldn't really be surprised either way. I think there'll be a team that's sort of like battling like non-play-in to play-in. They're going to be battling, I think, in that 5, 6, 7 range, and just because they do have some talent and they have a really good coach. So that's where I see them.
Okay, I got 7. I had the Knicks. Who you got 7?
Who do I have as 7, Bogues? I've got standings. Boom.
Yeah.
I had Atlanta at 7. I had Miami at 6, Atlanta at 7. I had New York at 5.
Okay. Yeah, look, I think New York, one thing I read were they were one of the healthiest teams last season. So they, as far as guys on court, they were one of the healthiest. So they were, they dodged a lot of bullets and they played pretty well. But you can't sustain the health thing. Is going to eventually, you're not going to be, if you're top 5 again, then yes, I see him higher than 7, but I predicted them based on the fact that, Tibbs, is he still going to ride everyone high minutes? How does that all work? Notable acquisitions for them. DiVincenzo is a good pickup for them, I think. I believe he's done some good things in Golden State, and I think he'll be really good for them. But yeah, the rotations, high minutes pro, they've had luck with injuries. Will Fournier play? Will he finally crack the rotation? We know that Thibs is a guy that once you're in the doghouse, it's very hard to get out of that. So I think they can use him. Like, I think he didn't play well last season, but he also didn't really get much of an opportunity after the first, probably month of the season. So I'm interested to see how that all goes. But I'm basing 7 on them being super healthy last season and having a good run with health. That they'll probably have some injuries this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, look, they're a solid team, though. Look, Jalen Brunson is what he is. He's a floor general, floor leader. He can score and pick and roll. He's tough. And, guys like Josh Hart and, I think DiVincenzo is going to really help him with his energy. But, Barrett, Randall, Mitchell Robinson, like you said, they're going to play a lot of minutes. And look, Tibbs has been doing the same stuff since he's got in the league. And he sort of pushes you to the limit, and he gets those guys ready to play. People might say it's the right way to do it, wrong way to do it. Who are we to judge it? I think they're an interesting team. I don't think they shoot it well enough to be really good, considering what they have. Look, Brunson can make shots. Barrett's never really been able to shoot. Randall's been up and down. Mitchell Robinson's got to give, an effort for 82 games. I think they got a lot out of Hartenstein, but they really gotta be consistent. They're always going to fight you. They're always going to be tough. I do really look, they got Josh Hart at trade deadline last year. I think he's going to be, giving them a full year of him and Brunson playing together. I think he can give them a lot of, good defensively, gives them a guy who plays hard, plays smart. They don't really have any great players, in my opinion. They got some good players like, obviously Brunson's their best player. Randall could fill up the stat sheet, but they don't really have that great player. They just got to play well collectively. I think with, their sort of inner toughness and plus their coach being, so well prepared, I think they could grind out wins. I just think that it's going to be, come April, it's going to be tough for them. But I think they could really be a team that could be in the top 5, top 6, in the East and just sort of compete. I just don't think they have the pieces. They're going to start having to make some moves to, get some guys out of there. I don't know if they're going to redo it through the draft a little bit. Keep your core together. Keep the Brunsons. In my opinion, I think you got to get rid of Barrett, Randall. You keep it with Brunson. You have Hart. I like Quickly. But now start bringing a couple other players. Like I said, they're a team that will be in the top 6, top 7 and grind it out. I think they're really missing that other piece to put with Brunson that could really take them over the top.
And that was Towns was rumored in the offseason, so we'll see if anything heats up with that with Minnesota. 8, I had Indiana. I think they'll improve with Carlisle there another season. They got good young guards. They don't have an absolute superstar yet. Halliburton's obviously a very good guard for him, but they brought in Bruce Brown, notable acquisition off a championship, Daniel Tice and Obi Toppin. Nothing too crazy with the acquisitions, but I think they'll be better. I think they'll be solid. I look at the teams below them. There's maybe 2 teams, 3 teams that could probably take 8 that are below them. But I just think that Carlisle, is going to get his hands in there a bit more this season after being there for a little bit and should churn out a little bit more wins in what is the basketball mecca in Indiana, Pro.
Yeah, I think they're going to be improved. I have them at 10. Look, didn't have a great season last year. Obviously, they were in the lottery. They've got some young players. I think this team goes as far as Halliburton takes them, 20 and 10 last year. Mathurin has to really take that next step in his development and to really take that team to another level. You know what you're going to get out of Halliburton. Miles Turner is going to play solid. Rim protecting big, 18 and 7. He does what he does. Buddy Hield, if he's going to stay, there's been a lot of rumors of him getting moved, but I like the Bruce Brown acquisition. I think, Carlisle really plays, does well with the guards like that. His toughness, he's been around. He's a tough kid. 11-4 last year on a championship team. Big loss for Denver. And I think they could do okay. They don't have any great players. They got Halliburton, who's really good. That second unit, solid. With guys like T.J. McConnell, Buddy, Aaron Naismith, Jalen Smith will play, Theis will play. They got a couple of decent young players that'll play in the rotation. But look, Halliburton's going to be really high usage for him. He's going to put those guys in position. Obi Toppin really has to take the next step of his development. He's disgruntled in New York for no reason. The guy's been a little bit of a flop, as far as how high he got picked. He's got to be solid for them. I think one thing Rick really does, and Tibbs does it too, he puts those guys in roles and he expects those guys to stay with it, especially if you're not really all that talented and you need to stay in a role. And that's what Rick polices pretty well. So I think he'll do well with that. But look, they're building something there around Halliburton. They're trying to acquire some things. They're using Buddy Hield as pieces. But I think, Bruce Brown's got a good contract for them. He's non-guaranteed after, I think he signed a 2-year deal, if I'm not mistaken, team option second year, $22 million first year, $23 million non-team option for the second year. So interesting with that to see, look, it's a low risk deal for them in going forward. But I think, like I said, Mathurin, guys like Obi Toppin's got to take their game to another level. Buddy Hield's got to be consistent and to go forward. But they're a good team. They're scrappy. I think they could sort of, they'll be in the play-in, depending on where, and I think they'll do okay.
Agree. They'll play hard. That's one thing, and they'll put themselves in positions to be in games. The talent will probably hurt them in the long run. 9, I got Brooklyn. I think you had Brooklyn as well at 9. They should scrape in. Look, they had a decent finish to last season. Once things kind of steadied and normalized after the trade, they were okay. But they play hard, man. Bridges and notable acquisitions: Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith Jr., Ben Simmons is a notable acquisition to me because he's healthy. So, look, I think he's obviously got a lot of people doubting whether he can bounce back. Can he get back to the Ben Simmons of old? His first couple of years in the league, downhill threat, getting on the rim. Obviously, you're going to say has to knock down his free throws for any of that to all come together, which we both agree on. That's probably the outlier in all this is just getting his confidence back from the free throw line. If he can just get to the low to mid 60s, it then takes away the doubt that he has in his mind to get on the rim and try to dunk on someone. If you're shooting the 40s, you can actually see, Ben becomes a bit more hesitant and takes completely away from his strengths. Obviously a defensive menace at the other end, so he can still mitigate a little bit of his offensive liability, but they need him to come in healthy. Cam Johnson, Royce O'Neal, they got a pretty well-balanced roster. Cam Thomas obviously will play a bigger role, had some really big games, a few 40-point games last season on that stacked roster. So I think they'll be solid. They're not going to set the world on fire. They'll be up and down, but I think they'll be a solid team that will make a play in for me at the 9.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're a team they're just sort of in flux, right? With the deals they made, to acquire the talent that they did, and they gave away a lot of great players in return for some young guys that could really help them, and a lot of draft picks going forward. This year's team, look, Dinwiddie, Thomas, Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, Claxton will probably be, starting 5, maybe Cam Johnson in there. I'm not sure, but I think that, look, they're solid. They play hard. They're gritty. Bridges is obviously their best player. And then, him and Dinwiddie, a good combination. Bridges, to me, can't really be your best player to be a really good team. I think he's got to play that second or third role, a defender, cutter, a guy who can make open shots. I think when he becomes your isolation go-to guy, sometimes it probably won't work out for you as well as, you wanted to. Cam Thomas is a good guy, in my opinion. If he comes off the bench, he's good. He can give you some energy off the bench. Him as a starter, he's got to understand as a starter, he's probably a 4th or 5th option, where he just has to sort of knock down shots consistently. That's sort of, last year he took a jump in his shooting, 38% from 3. But I like the team. It gives you a lot of energy. I like the combination of any type of combination of Johnson, Bridges, and Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal. All those guys can guard. They can give you a little bit of an offensive punch. But they're a young team. They're just still figuring things out. I think Nick Claxton's got to continue to sort of rise his game to be somebody who can give you like 14 and 10. going forward. Second unit's okay. Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith Jr. We talked about Royce O'Neal. They're a good team. The whole Ben Simmons thing, look, Bogues, it's sort of like, every year it's the same thing. The last few years, it's, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm mentally into it. I'm gonna shoot when I get open shots, and then he doesn't shoot. So until he does it, how can anybody really believe it? And the thing is, look, we know he's going through stuff, and everybody's going through a little bit of different things. But look, you don't have to do a lot. You do a little bit, and people are gonna be all they're gonna have your back going forward, 1,000%. They just need to see something. They need to see life. The guy's making too much money to do what he's doing, to not play, to give excuses. You're a pro. You got to go out. You got to play. You got to show that team. And like you said, he's like a new acquisition. He hasn't played. He hasn't been any type of a factor. The fucking mascot's been more of a factor than he has. And he needs to show, like, look, you don't need to shoot 40% from three. You just got to show the ability that if you're going to have an open shot, you're going to take it. When you're going to get to the, when you're driving it, you're going to actually want to make contact with your defender to get to the free throw line and not be afraid of it.
That's a big one for me. I think everything else is second to that. I think his game is so on the rim. When I practiced with him with the Boomers, the one session that he showed up to, when he's going downhill with a mindset of getting in the paint, even though he's not going to shoot the three, he's not a jump shooter, I know he's trying to get on the rim, and you still can't really stay in front of him. He's got an elite talent there, but like you said, if you're going to get in there and Euro step to a hook shot because you don't want to get hit, it's taken away from your strength. So I think that everything for him, as a guy who had free throw struggles, is free throws for him. If he can shoot the ball at a decent clip, and not even, I'm not talking he needs to shoot 70, 80%. Just get to the 60s where he's confident enough to not get hacked on purpose, where I think then he relates to like, oh man, they're fouling me on purpose, and then his aggression's limited, he'll be fine. But that's all the off-season videos, that we see, shooting jumpers. I'm not worried about any of that. I think his whole thing is mental, and it's a free throw line. If he fixes that, he'll come back to the 13, 14, 8 and 8 Ben Simmons that we saw in Philadelphia quite easily. And defensive end, we've got no real gripes there. Like, he's elite, multi-positional defender, can guard point guards, can guard bigs. So he's at that end, we don't even have a worry. He's fantastic. But you might not be on the floor with the way the game's played today, late in games. You can't have him out there for late game stops if the offense isn't there. So it's a very valid point, and I hope he gets it back. Like we've talked about it a lot till the cows come home. Everyone's heard it, but he's an Australian star that we want to do well, that I want to do well. I want him to play well in the NBA and come back and then play a great role for the Boomers to try and get a medal. So I hope he finds it, and we're all pulling for him. I mean, people here are still, throughout the ups and downs of national team, not national team, I want to play, I don't want to play. People still are supportive of, like, you hate to see an athlete in that kind of, I guess, that little asylum mentally where they're just overthinking things, and you can quite clearly see it on the floor. So I hope it all gets figured out. But yeah, I like their roster, pro. I think they'll be competitive and they'll be decent even without Ben Simmons.
Yeah, with Simmons, look, we over talk about it, no doubt about it. My feelings of him, but with the whole free throw shooting thing, look, I spent time with you with it. I was with Rondo with it, and you just have to embrace getting fouled. Embrace getting fouled. Understand that at first, look, he's got to get some type of routine going every day. Game day, non-game day, off day, what have you, and shoot. But that's only going to take you so far. You got to be able to get a routine, to get a technique that's going to work for you. Then you got to get to the line in games, like in practices. Like if I was them, I would every day go through some type of a game situation under 2 minutes, and then foul the fuck out of him and make him shoot free throws in clutch situations in practice. And then in games, and just talk to him, say, look, I don't give a fuck if you go 0 for 30, your first 30. If you're any type of an athlete or competitor, you're going to figure out what you're doing wrong to fix it. The first thing is dealing with it in an arena where people are expecting you to miss. You got to go through that and continue to embrace getting to the line. Don't be afraid of it. And then you're going to start seeing a little success and more. But you're not going to hide from it for 70 games out of the season. and then all of a sudden want to play in the playoffs, and then, all right, I'm just going to get fouled in the playoffs. You're talking about this stuff in October, but by April I'll be all right. No. You want to embrace getting fouled on fucking October 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. Get to the line, deal with missing it, deal with the embarrassment, and then just keep on getting better with it. Because if you hide from it and expect it just going to happen in April and May after not really going to the line at all, it's not going to work. I wouldn't say he's okay just because how he deals with things, but he's got to embrace that. But yeah, I like their roster. I think they're okay. I just think there's too much talent in the East for them to do a lot, but I think that they could, stay steady. They've got young talent. They got a ton of draft picks. They're going to be good in years to come. I think, Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, Claxton, Johnson are guys that they're going to go forward with, and they just got to keep on sort of acquiring players here and there. But I think they'll be good. I'll be interested to see Dennis Smith Jr. backing up Dinwiddie a point and seeing where he goes. He really hasn't had a ton of success in his career so far, but he's had some flashes. I'd like to see him throughout the whole year.
Yeah, finished with Charlotte last season, right? Was quite decent there. So, all right, 10, Orlando, you had them at 8, so much of a muchness. I think they'll be young and fun, and I think last season we spoke about the fact that they were in so many games last season. Their record didn't reflect how decent and consistent they were. I mean, they had numerous games losing by 2 possessions, 1 possession against good teams that we both agreed that given another year or two they start to figure this thing out, they'll be in the mix, and that's why I'm giving them a sneaky shot in the plane. I just think they're well coached. They play hard. No huge acquisitions. Joe Ingles to sign there, obviously, so brought him some shooting and just a veteran presence there. But they're going to be young and fun, and I think they'll just scrape their way into a play-in, which will be very important for their long-term success. Experiencing that, you could see them getting through a play-in the way they play, and they're not going to beat themselves. They're not overly super talented. They're not one of these teams that's got a boatload of talent and they have to figure out how to make it mesh. But Cole Anthony's not bad. Banchero is going to be their guy. Carter Jr. is decent. Fultz is making a little rehash with his career. Gary Harris, Joe Ingles I mentioned. Jonathan Isaac is healthy, so looking forward to seeing how he can contribute. They do have the dunk contest champion in Mac McClung Pro, so I don't know if you knew that, but there might be some good warm-up dunks. The Wagner brothers are there, obviously, Jalen Suggs. So I think they got a good mix of youth there. A little bit of veteran sprinkled on top, but I think they'll be in the mix to be competitive no matter where they're sitting on that table throughout the season. I think they're not a for a team that's going to be bottom 6, bottom 7, they're not a team that you can tick the box on and get an easy win in the regular season.
No, I really like where they're going, and I think they could become really good at times. They're going to beat some really good teams. They got to figure some things out, as far as going forward, where they're going to be with their roster. But look, I think when Banchero and Wagner are 2 all-star level talents, I think Banchero is obviously their best player, right now at 20-7. Wagner is coming on strong at 18-4 last year. Really good, multi-talented, can score, can post up, has good touch, real smart player. Banchero just comes at you and just keeps on going. I think where they got to figure things out, Bogues, I think Anthony Black is one of the top 2 or 3 players in the draft last year. They drafted him out of University of Arkansas. He's a Dallas kid. He's really talented. He's got great vision. He reminds me a little bit of Giddey, where he's got really good size. He's got really good vision. I don't know if he's as good as Giddey is, but even at this stage, but his vision is off the charts. He's like a Sean Livingston type tall guard that could really see the floor, really get in the paint. And the thing right now is, I think Black is better than Fultz. He's better than Suggs. He's better than Anthony. I think right now where their guards are, that Suggs obviously got lost to injury last year. I think, in my opinion, you move Cole Anthony throughout the year. Fultz has become really good. I think, in my opinion, going forward, Fultz is a good player off the bench. I think Black is a good, starting point guard. Juwan Howard's kid, Jet Howard's a good player. He'll be good in the future, for them. Wendell Carter's really solid at 15-8. I really like him. I think Jamal Mosley, I respect Jamal as one of the better young coaches in the league for sure. But I think they always play hard. They always support each other. It's interesting now, though, Bogues, like last year, like they were really young and trying they're just trying to find themselves in the league. When you have a little bit of success, Last year they had 34 wins. I don't think anybody really expected that. They probably expected them at like 17, 18, 19 wins. But now you got a little bit of success. Where do you go from there? It crumbles some teams. Some teams crumble with it. There's not a lot of pressure. You get it. And now there's that pressure a little bit because people are expecting it. I think that they're going to have some issues with guard play as far as like who to play long minutes to. I don't think they'll play Black early. But now even with Fultz and Anthony and Suggs, who's going to have their ball in their hand, that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But look, I like what they're doing. They got a lot of young players that they don't really have to sign for big money. Guys like Gary Harris will be coming off the book soon, open up a little bit more money as well. So now you've got these young players, some guys that you could move. You'll have some cap room. I think this year they're at 118 million. Then they go to 79 million or so next year. So they'll have some cap room. They're going to have to sign their guys going forward, but they're a little bit of a sleeping giant. If they could if Wagner and Banchero could keep on getting better, Wendell Carter could stay healthy, and then guys like, Black and, could really take a step with their development. Jet Howard, now you're talking about some things. So I really like them. I think they're good. I think it wouldn't even surprise me if they move up to 8 or 7, but it'll be interesting to watch them going forward.
All right, and the bottom 5, I'm not going to go through individually because they don't deserve to be. If you're not in our top 10, we're not going to go through individually. But I'll go through my order and touch on things very quickly. And if you want to chime in, feel free. But I got Toronto 11. I think they're in a rebuild. Dennis Schroeder will help them. Jalen McDaniels, another acquisition for him. Chicago at 12. Just not a good roster mix. We said this last season. Ball's health also is a huge concern for them, whether he plays again. They did bring in Javon Carter and Torrey Craig. Charlotte, young and fun, won't win games. Notable acquisition, Miles Bridges, even though he's been on their roster, he's back to play. So they will be fun. Their commentators are fun to listen to at times because they really do get into regular season games, but I don't think they'll win many games. Detroit, another year away from consistency in their rebuild, I think. Joe Harris is a notable guy that will probably play some minutes for him. And then Washington, for me, I just think they'll score. I just don't see them grinding out wins. They brought in Gallinari, Jordan Poole, and Landry Shamet, but I just don't think they're going to be very good. I think there's going to be a bit of a wrestle there between Jordan Poole and Kuzma for touches and that little push-pull theory that you see with young teams. But that's kind of my bottom 5, Pro. You got any notes on any of those 5 teams?
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is just blah. I think that, Schroeder playing great in the World Championships, I think that sometimes it's a kiss of death. I mean, play really well in an international event during the summer, and then the expectations go up a little bit. I don't really expect much from Toronto. Chicago, I just think that not having Ball, I don't think. Look, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any inside information, but it doesn't look like Ball is going to play, most of the year, if not the whole year. And I think losing him and having to go to point guards that aren't really point guards, and then their roster is not that good as it is, I think they're going to have some issues there. Detroit, people are expecting a lot out of Detroit. A lot of their young guys, they had some injury issues the last year, so guys could play a little bit more. I think Washington is going to be terrible. I think when you're expecting, Jordan Poole to be your guy, it's going to be tough. But they're not really looking to win games anyway. They're looking to get in the lottery and go, and continue to be bad and acquire players. And then I don't know. I don't really see much out of Charlotte, really. Ball got hurt a little bit last year, but they don't really have anybody on their roster. Brandon Miller is going to be a guy they drafted. Nick Smith's another guy they drafted the first round. They'll be good. I like their young guys. Brandon Miller and Nick Smith to be decent. We didn't really discuss much out of the draft, but Miller played. What's up?
Kai Jones?
Maybe on their EA Sports team, the esports team. I don't expect Kai Jones to be on their regular team, but I think on the esports team, he'll be really good. Or if there's like YouTube influencer games, I think he'll be really good for that. But I don't expect much out of Charlotte this year. And one thing I usually listen to NBA radio, and Steve Clifford was on talking about how good of a guy Miles Bridges is. And I love Clifford to death. I think he's a great dude, no ego, whatever. But I'm sorry, man, I can't really be I can't be speaking glowingly out of a guy who beat the shit out of his significant other. So I think that's
what's he supposed to say? That's a problem, bro. Like, just
fuck
probably
that, Bogues.
Just
Fuck
say nothing.
that. You could fire my fucking ass. I would never say a good fucking word about a guy who fucking lays hands on a woman ever. I wouldn't say anything bad, but I'll be. You know what?
Just keep it to
I'd
basketball.
take the same philosophy that guy at the NBA should have taken when they were asking about the games over in what's it called, Abu Dhabi. Next question, please. I can't say anything good about a guy who strikes a woman like that.
Fair enough. He's his head coach. He's in a tough spot, but
I
agree. You just take the high road. He's here to play basketball. Hopefully he puts that behind him and we move on from it. But it's a tough one for him. All right, moving on. Follow Dabble, the social betting experience. You can follow anyone from your best mate to me, Andrew Bogut. Andrew Bogut, all one word, on the Dabble app. We'll start some bets up once the NBA season starts. And download the app at the App Store. Dabble, all one word. Dabble socially and gamble responsibly. Get into some NBL stuff. Just quickly, I want to touch on the national team. There was, I did some clips on our chat last season. I was pretty, hard on the national team and the performance, just saying it was underwhelming. And I had some people reach out, Brian Gordon. I don't want Brian Gordon gone, but you have to be critical of the performance. And these were conversations on the podcast. I have these conversations with Brian Gordon. I've had these conversations with people on the team that you got to look back and reflect and be critical. Otherwise, you're not going to move forward. So for all the people that are overreacting, thinking that I was calling for Brian's head, completely opposite. I think he's in a great position to retool and get to Paris, obviously bringing a bronze. I've known him since I was a young kid. So for those people, just pump the brakes a little bit. It's not that extreme, but you have to be critical of that performance because it's one of our kind of worst finishes we've had in a decade plus. So chill out, people. Hey, Pro, check this out. So I brought this in for you, man. Nice little championship ring for you. We had our, wherever you can see it, we got our NBL ring, Sydney Kings yesterday against Adelaide. So I thought I'd bring that in and just show the people a nice little gold ring. And it's our second one. Funnily enough, they're exactly the same as last season's. So hopefully for our three-peat, the NBL will change them a little bit. But that's just our ring. We had our celebration yesterday. 14,000 plus people turned up at Kudos Bank Arena. So we appreciate all that. It was a really good turnout for us. The NBL crowds all over the league are flying. So let's get into the NBL results real quick, and then we'll touch on what you text me about over the weekend, which most people probably want to hear about. Southeast Melbourne, they've been struck by the injury bug again. They had an 0-2 weekend, so not very good to them. Losing to Illawarra. Illawarra getting their first win, which was against Southeast Melbourne. Melbourne United go down to Tasmania, which was a really good game. Melbourne had the control of the whole game. Tasmania came back and stole it late. Milton Doyle was amazing in that game, especially late. I think he scored 10 or 12 straight points from at one point. Tasmania, impressive weekend. They beat the Sydney Kings on Friday, go to Melbourne and beat Melbourne in Melbourne on Sunday. So a really good weekend for the Jack Jumpers. So the Kings obviously lost at Tasmania. They handled their business at home yesterday against Adelaide, which puts Adelaide to 0-4. Almost crisis time for them. Cairns, they go 2-0. They beat Southeast Melbourne and the Brisbane Bullets in what was a crazy game, which we'll get into right now. But Brisbane getting a big win in New Zealand, then playing Cairns at home. The game where Aaron Baynes exploded, you text me about it. You saw the highlight. There's a lot to talk about in this. I'm not going to go too in-depth in it. But Aaron Baynes, had two guys boxing him out. I think it was a pretty even game at that point, right before halftime. And Mayen was getting ragdolled a little bit by Bainesy, like most of us do. I've been there. He's a big, strong man. That's trying to boxing him out is a very tough task. And Mayen was getting ragdolled a little bit, turned and elbowed him in the face. I saw it on live play and realized what happened. And Baynes had gone crazy. The referees had called a double technical. Baynes had then asked the referee to go to review and see his elbow in the face. And the referee was just kind of like, we're not reviewing it. And I think at that point, he was already steaming. And I think that set him off at the fact that refs wouldn't even go to review it, which they don't have to do. But that's what I think pissed Baynes off. And you don't excuse his behavior from that point forward. He was a very scary look in his eyes. He lost composure. And I've been around Aaron Baynes a number of times in a number of campaigns. And he's had those issues throughout his career. He does get he does go dark a little bit where he loses things and you need to bring him back into the fold. But one thing I will say is he's never the instigator in these things. Never the instigator, never a guy to start this. But if someone's hit him or he feels hard done by, he loses his mind. So anyway, they leave those two on the court, or Baynes gets a second tech, but it gets assessed to the bench for those confused. He got 2 techs, but in international ball pro, if you get assessed to tech while you're on the bench, it goes to the bench. So he was lucky he didn't get thrown out there. He goes to the locker room to calm down. It was only about a minute left in the half. Mayen's not ejected at that point. Now, I've confirmed with the NBL, both those guys came out and were thrown out during warm-ups at halftime, which was you don't see very often. But the Aron Baynes thing, I've spoken to some people that were in the mix there. It's on camera as well. From what I understand, the head coach of the Cairns Taipans, now in Brisbane for the Bullets, they have a locker room and they have a separate room where they meet because it's a small arena. They all have their locker room where the showers and that are, and they go across the hall to a meeting spot for their film and their half-court address and their pre-game address. What I understand, Adam Ford was pacing up and down the hallway, and for 2 or 3 minutes, not sure what he was waiting or trying to do. His team was, Taipans were already in their locker room waiting for him to come in for the address. I'm not sure if he does that every game, gives the guys 3 or 4 minutes, but he was pacing up and down. Right when that is happening, Aron Baynes comes out of the locker room because he'd gone there to calm down to go to the meeting room where the coaches are. What I understand is that 40 has gone up to Aron, and I've heard some people have said there was some touching involved. Some people have said there wasn't, but there was a finger pointed in Aron's face from the coach. That's when that escalated, where Aron Baynes had pushed him, I believe. And then we have all these things coming out on broadcast about, people giving assumptions about what happened and Aron needs to handle himself better. Don't condone any of the behavior from either of them. I think there's a lot of blame being placed on the head coach because you can't be doing that. I think this situation is resolved at halftime. If that's the gas isn't, the petrol's not poured on the fire. Aron's very reactionary, but he's not an instigator. He would not have sought out coach to try and go and start another kerfuffle. But I think the coach instigated that to an extent, which doesn't help circumstances. So much so, Pro, that this then the referees had realized. I don't know if they saw it at halftime in the hallway. Aron's come out. He's got a technical for the altercation. That's what he was thrown out for. That Mayen's come out for warm-ups. They've said, hey, we've checked your elbow at halftime, which I didn't know they could do. But for a hostile act, the wording is hostile act. The referees can actually retrospectively review something if they deem it dirty or cause a kerfuffle, and they then ejected him, Pro. But it was, I know you saw it, give me your thoughts, but you never want to see a player like that. And Aron, he's probably the first to put his hand up and say he handled it poorly, but he was steaming, Pro.
Bogues, you know how that is. Like, you hit a player in the right spot, they just lose their fucking mind. And I think that's what he did. He looked scary with it, that he was pissed, going into it when he got elbowed. Look, the guy, I don't know. I mean, it looked like a tough elbow. I don't know if the guy did it completely on purpose. They were sort of bear hugging. Both guys are trying to take him out. Guy elbows in the face. He gets pissed. Obviously, double pissed that they didn't really review it. My thing is, like, the biggest problem I see, you don't see it a lot in the NBA, where both teams sort of go in the locker room the same entrance, right? Like, yeah, that's a problem. And look, it might be just how places are constructed in Australia. I have no idea, but I think that's a problem. Then, like, I think as a teammate, you got to take him away from it, not like either shuffle him ahead of the guy or let that guy go and then go, because you got to be smart enough as a coach or a player to be like, dude, why escalate it? Because look, in that moment before you look at the film, you probably think the guy did it on purpose. He's pissed about it. That's a problem. Now with the whole coaching thing, look, I didn't see it. I didn't see any film of that. I didn't have any information, whatever. But look, man, as a coach, it's not like Aron fucking clotheslined the guy and cheap shotted your guy where you would really take offense to it and want to get into somebody's face. First of all, you're professional, you're older, you should know, like, just let it go. But regardless of what happened, as a coach, you got to be a better man with it, and just stay out of the way of the player. And yeah, it's a bad fucking situation. It's tough. I saw you tweet something out or something about when people are trying to comment on it, if it was mental health or not. I don't know how the fuck you do that, as just a commenter or
it was more the insinuations on a commentary team when you don't put the facts out, and they've painted as, there was nothing painted towards the fact that, look, Coach Ford did it wrong as well, right? I truly believe, and being around Aron Baynes in these situations, I've dealt with these situations where he's lost his mind at practices and whatever, and he usually goes away, you give him his 5 or 10, and he comes back to the fold and he's fine. I think this situation would have been resolved. The fact that Coach Ford was waiting for him, now whether he was waiting or not, I don't know, but then confronted him on top of that, I think that was wrong. This situation was over with. He had his tech, he would have came back out, did his warm-up, would have been good to go. That was bad, and as a coach, you cannot do that. And like you said, Aron didn't start the cheap shot or didn't do something crazy for a coach to even address it. But, Fordy's a passionate guy, and he's chirpy, and he likes to get into it argy-bargy as well. He's not going to take a step back. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong guy. Now, the other point is, yes, the NBL's got to look at, some of these arenas don't have 2 exit points. They have 1 to get to the locker rooms. You then have to stagger this, because we don't see it a lot in our sport, but in the NBA, you see it a lot. 82 games, guys are tired, road trips, didn't get sleep, banged up, a bit of shit talking starts. Scuffles happen almost every other night in the NBA, especially if you're walking through the same tunnel. Guys are going to be talking shit, and then one guy might respond, right? NBL definitely has to look at staggering those exits in the arenas. We're one of those arenas, the Kings Arena is as well, where you go out the same tunnel, shit can hit the fan. It doesn't happen as much in the NBL historically. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future, and that's definitely an issue. Second one is, yes, Brisbane. Aron Baynes has a bit of a temper and can see red, and you have a coach. Luke Longley was that guy with the national team, unfortunately. He was his personal bodyguard / psych at times, where if Baynes is in that point, you know that as a head coach or a teammate, you got to know your teammates and your players' weaknesses and be like, hey, this guy, we need to get someone with him. Make sure he gets to the locker room, have him sit down, have a drink, have a towel, and then he'll be fine. And that's Baynesy, right? And that's what I think that the Brisbane have to know that. But this is an ugly situation. And I'm not condoning Aron's actions. He's got to live and stand by his actions. If you speak to him, he would say the same thing. I handled that poorly once it happened, but I think what happened at halftime also needs to be addressed. So there is potential for suspensions. Sydney Kings play Brisbane on Friday. I never want to play teams shorthanded. I'm not one of those guys like, I hope their stars out. No, I want to see the best play the best, and I want to earn our win in Brisbane on Friday. But there is a chance that Aron Baynes potentially gets suspended. And there is a chance that, my argument is, if he gets suspended, I think Coach Ford definitely should be in the conversation for something as well. And I know they're off to the US now, playing in the US game, so they're not even here this weekend. So I'm not sure how that whole tribunal suspensions is going to work. But just an ugly...
they're playing exhibition?
They're playing an exhibition. Yeah, Kansas is over there, and they're going over, I think they're playing, is it Toronto, I think? I think they're playing in Toronto, I think it might be. So they're going over there, and I don't know how that's going to be handled. That's just, obviously, if you suspend him, it wouldn't be for that game, because that game's got nothing to do with FIBA. So we'll be interested to see how the NBL reacts to all of this. But the big one that most people were asking was why the suspension after. So I've learned something new, that you can retrospectively go to film if you're a referee at any point in the game. Doesn't have to be halftime or three-quarter time or quarter time. If there's a hostile act that you missed, and actually go back in time and eject someone later on down the game, which is not something we often see. The NBA is pretty good at addressing it straight away. But I think the NBA do have a similar rule that if they see something hostile later on film, that they can address it. So interesting nonetheless.
Bogues, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I just sort of saw the thing. Somebody commented on it. I think I follow a bunch of people that sort of are fans of the show, and somebody tweeted about it, and then I sent it to you. And it's unfortunate, man. It's just one of those things that just happen, and you got to deal with. It's it's tough, man. I just, you feel for the guy, and look, players lose their temper. We've seen it. We've been side by side with it, looking at other players that lost their shit. Remember, like Trevor Ariza wanting to kill Salah. There's a bunch of stuff that happens. Wes Matthews,
Wes Matthews used to get subbed out.
Wes Matthews, I mean, that guy might have been the angriest nice guy I ever met in my life. That guy literally just got angry, and sometimes that
he had a chair in the tunnel.
Did that
remember, bro? Yeah, he had a chair.
They put him on the bike on the tunnel.
No, he had a chair back there too that he'd sit on.
Oh, he had a chair, yeah.
So he would get subbed out of games, fuming for whatever, just being subbed out, not playing well, missing the three, and he would walk straight to the tunnel. They'd have a chair there for him where he'd go and sit and then sit down and kumbaya and try to recompose himself and then come sit on the bench because I guess he knew himself. He knew he was going to say something stupid to coach or kick a chair or
Dude,
he'd be like, "Where's that?"
West,
like he's awesome.
He's just too fucking
play as hard as he can. But you love those guys. Like he plays as hard as he can, but every now and then you got to put him back on the railway. You know, put him back on the tracks and get him. But he was definitely one. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it'll all be okay. Everyone just needs to pump their tires. In Australia, that kind of stuff's frowned upon. Like it's, as an athlete, you can never show emotion or passion because our football players and rugby league, the media is, oh, look at that, it's a bad role model kids are watching. But people are human and they have bad emotions. Was it right what he did? No. But everyone's human, everyone fucks up, everyone makes mistakes, everyone's reactive. How would you react if you got an elbow to the face when it actually happened? You can talk about, oh, it wasn't that big of an elbow, I should have done that. But until you get punched in the mouth, you don't know what it's like getting punched in the mouth. So just one of those things. Finally, the NBL, they've got two next stars here, pro. I've caught both of them in small doses. Frenchman Alex Sarr and Bobi Klintman, Swedish kid, both on draft boards. They're legit. They are legit players, pro. I think Alex Sarr is going to be a top 5 pick, I think, potentially in this coming draft. Klintman's going to be up there as well. They're both long. Sarr's 7 foot, made some huge plays for Perth. They put him in late in the game, made back-to-back threes. But even throughout the course of a game, you can see this kid's long and athletic, but just knows how to play. He's been taught basketball the right way. Positionally knows where to go, knows where to find his shot, happy to swing the ball. And Klintman's the same. They both shoot a very good clip from 3. So 2 names, pro, that I think you'll see on the draft boards as this season goes on, just climb higher and higher. And I think they've been really impressive to this point.
That's great, man. I mean, look, everything you look at with development with young kids is through the G League, Ignite program. I think that overtime elite's sort of losing a little bit of its luster. So you might see the NBL, your development program, as probably the second best. Well, probably the first, because you could probably have more players develop. Although the G League's probably going to have the first and the second pick in the draft next year on their roster. But I mean, I think the overtime sort of that luster is sort of fallen off. They've sort of changed their philosophy on their development. It used to be they're just paying these guys out the ass and they lose their college eligibility. Now that they sort of restructure what they can do because they're not making the money back on their investment. So now they're making it where these guys are not really getting paid. They're getting paid through NIL deals where these guys could still go back to college. So I think your Stars program, Future Stars program is, obviously it's been legit, but I think they're going to sort of.
And I see it. If I'm a scout, I take more from seeing these young next stars come and play in the NBL than I do from that G League shit. Like the G League's at times jungle ball and ugly. It's undisciplined basketball. Whereas this is like, you look at Flowers, a kid that committed to Louisville, then decommitted and didn't tell his coach, and then the NBL announced he's coming to the next stars. He hasn't played much, and he looks out of sorts with Adelaide. They're 0-4. He doesn't look like he's there yet as a young fella. So there's guys that have come over that are struggling. And if I'm a scout, I'd rather see them in this forum than the G League, because I think it really, teams are picking up full court here. They're trying to turn you in the backcourt. They're trapping. There's a lot of funky stuff that happens in FIBA basketball. So I take a whole lot more weight as a scout. And that's why we had 40 scouts here for the NBL Blitz. I think they're starting to understand that. So it's good to see. And one final thing, a most improved player. I'm a bit biased, but most improved player pick for the NBL, Jalen Galloway's getting it. He's playing phenomenal basketball right now. His numbers have jumped up defensively. He's been really, really good. And I think he's a slight chance to make that Boomers squad, not the 12. I don't know if he'll make that. He'll be in the mix, but I think he's in the mix to make that initial squad leading into Paris. The way if he continues his form from these first 3 games, 5 steals last night, he's shooting the ball. It's early 3 games in, but he's shooting the ball at 60-odd% from 3, gets on the rim, athletic. I think he's got a really good chance to continue to blossom, and I've really liked his improvement. I think he'll be the most improved player pro. And just finally, WNBL preseason tournament in Brisbane this weekend. So if you're living in Brisbane or Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast or in that area,
There's a preseason tournament there. 4 teams: Sydney Flames, Townsville Fire, Perth Lynx, and Adelaide Lightning. It'll be at the River City. It's called the River City Rebound. It'll be at Northside Indoor Sports Centre at Zilmere. Zilmere? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, Zilmere. So check that out if you want to watch some women's hoops up here before the season officially starts. Let's get a couple of fact or fake newses out so we can let everyone go. We're over time already, Pro. We're trying to keep this to 1 hour 20, but you took about 30 minutes to do the Milwaukee Bucks, man, so I'm blaming you.
Wow. Okay, let's do that. Fact or fake news. You'll see another team in the Eastern Conference Finals besides the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics. Fact or fake news? At least one other team.
Yeah, any other team but them, yeah. I think fake news. I think that they're going to make it. The outlier for me is the James Harden thing with Philly. So depending on where that goes, I could change that answer in about 3 months' time. Post-deadline, I could change that answer if he stays. But I think as it lays now, I would say fake news. I think one of those 2 teams is getting through.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see any other team really competing with them like that unless there's an injury
exactly
thing that happens. Yeah, even Philly. So, but Harden stays. You're right. Something could happen, but I do think that.
Is there another Miami run anyone below them? No, I don't think so. I mean, Cleveland, like I said, I think they'll be a good regular season team. I don't think they'll do damage. I'm not worried about New York. Maybe Atlanta can make a surprise run out of nowhere with Quinn. He can maybe surprise us. Maybe them. Maybe they're the Miami of last season where they surprised a few people in the playoffs. But there's no one of note right now. But hopefully there is, because it was a fun ride it was a fun ride watching Miami just playing really undrafted guys and just making the finals. I think it was great for the league, and it was great for the Eastern Conference. So hopefully it wakes those 2 teams up in Milwaukee and Boston, and they get through this time.
No, I totally agree with that. All right, second, quickly, I think we talked about it, but let's talk about it again. Harden, James Harden will stay on the Philly roster throughout the whole year.
Fake news. I don't think he will, just based on, I think it was pretty emotional messaging by Harden when he put it out there, and the wording that he used, and you lied to me and distrust. And we know how NBA players feel when they feel like they've been lied to or hard done by. I don't think he's a guy that you can reel back. I think that I think there'll come a point where he could go back to causing some problems if things aren't going his way. Like if he's still on the roster by December, January, there's every chance that he tries to strategically do some shit to get his way out of there, right? So I think they're kind of going to have to do something. Do they get something back? Like you said, that's the problem. I think they get minimal back, and teams know that, but teams are absorbing that big-ass salary, right? So I don't think he'll be on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could see them doing, Bogues, is going to Miami with something. Miami's the only team besides the Clippers that could be like, all right, they'll probably throw in Lowry, Duncan Robinson and something else. The question is, do you really want to do that? That's probably the closest deal they're going to get.
Culture,
I think the Clipper deal.
Do they really do that, though? Heat culture really do that? And do you want James Harden in South Beach?
I think that you want culture, and you'll throw it out the window in a second if you feel as though you have no chance of winning. And again, I could be chastised and wrong for this, and I don't really care about right, wrong stuff, but I just don't. I think with what they lost, it's going to be really hard to really find that. Like, I thought Hero was perfect coming off the bench and scoring. They don't have that guy. And maybe a trade deadline, you're like, fuck it. Lowry's aging. Let's do it. Duncan Robinson this and maybe something else. I doubt it.
The pressure's on Harden, right? Like, so devil's advocate to South Beach staff and arguing against myself, he's like, if he does go to Miami, it's kind of getting to the mellow point where if he fucks that up, like we're 2 from there. Like for James Harden.
Kyrie,
so maybe
him and Kyrie are very similar in their deals right now. Look, they're high level players. That's some of the top 4 or 5 players at their position. They could really help your team. But I think the hijinks that they've done in the past, a lot of teams are like, we don't even want to deal with the headache. Both of those guys, multiple teams, they've had their issues, and they're tough. And the teams that have them right now really need them because of the salary they make, the structure of their team, really needing those guys to play really well, or a lot of shit's going to go wrong for a lot of different people if either one of those guys don't play well. The pressure is on him, but sometimes those guys don't care. Look, he's made a ton of money. He's already had his accolades, regardless of, he could just wake up one day and just like that candy bar commercial. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. And that's the situation you got to take and the philosophy you take. You just don't know. So I don't know. I say he stays. I don't think there's going to be a really trade that comes. And I think they're just going to figure out, you know what? Let me just play out the year, do the best. We're on a little bit of a run because outside of them and those two teams up top, there's really not a lot of teams that can really challenge them, if everybody's together in Philly. And I think that
I agree.
At one point,
that's what's crazy about it. That's what sucks about it.
Yeah.
That's what sucks about it. Because if James comes in with, all right, the more everything aside, I got a group here. We got a squad that can, we can even push Boston and Milwaukee in the right playoff series and the right run. But
look, if he plays well and stays out of harm's way with getting in trouble, if he plays well there and throughout the year helps them, and then he could say, fuck you, Philly, I'm just going to go wherever. But now there's going to be a couple of teams that be like, you know what? He played well last year, wasn't a problem. I'm not giving him $36 million, but I'm giving him a decent contract for 2 years or so because of this. That's where I want to be if I'm him. Maybe the Lakers, if they get off some money or whatever, next year or whatever, but let them play the whole year, and figure things out. Oh, fuck it. No, the Lakers are at $160 million next year. I don't think that's going to happen. But, that's where I think he's at. So I think that, I don't think there's going to be a trade for him. Then again, I don't care either way, but I think that's going to fall apart. The last thing, Bogues, is the Charlotte Hornets are going to win 20 games or more next year. Fact or fake news?
Fake news. They're under 20, I think. Even though I had them not last, I just don't think they. I'm actually being talked into from your reviews. I might even have them closer to last than I had. I think they're on 13th out of 15. But they're looking at their roster and all the shit they got to deal with. They'll be fun to watch. They'll be one of the funner losing teams in the league. That's my prediction. But I'm going to go under 20.
27 wins last year, Bogues, right? And they lose Oubre, and they got, I don't know, it's just a team that couldn't shoot straight, right? And the shit they're dealing with. And the thing is, they got to play Brandon Miller. He's the second pick in the draft. They got to play him, and they got to play Nick Smith, their first round pick off the bench. They got to deal with that. The Miles Bridges they didn't have last year, so maybe he plays and does well, whatever. They didn't really have him, so maybe they could do some stuff. But if I'm them, they got a bunch of guys got to come off your cap next year. I don't know. I think that they're gonna, the way they're gonna be, I just think they're gonna tank. They don't really have a chance at doing anything unless they come out of the gate well. I think they're going to start tanking. They're going to have to play their young guys. They got a bunch of shit they're dealing with. They're not very good. They got a really good coach, but I think they go under 20 and they challenge for that number one pick.
All right, we'll see. We'll see how wrong or right we are. Appreciate everyone. Thanks for all the good feedback, Pro. There's a lot of good feedback for having you on video, so we appreciate all that. A lot of good feedback having us on video. We've got some new clips coming out. It's all going good with the podcast. We appreciate everyone following it. Keep following us, subscribing, letting people know we're on YouTube, Rumble, kind of trying to get it out there everywhere. And we'll see you next week, bro.
All right, folks. See you next week, brother.